Joined now by charting man Dan McDermott from thechartguys.com. Dan, welcome.
Glad to be back, James.
So Dan, I don't know what we can say about the cannabis space that we don't say every week these days, but how's your sentiment meter today?
Oh, it's definitely down in the depths of despair, and that definitely has my attention to start looking in the other direction very, very patiently and cautiously. We know we're not going to go to zero, so there will be a bottom, and I said in a recent video that I do believe there will be very solid, I think I said 100% gains once we do find that bottom, but we have not found it yet, and we had a very clear, important point on the charts heading into this earnings season, and so far every single name has had a bearish reaction to its earnings, and that is leading us to another leg down, and that's pretty much just reaffirming the thesis that the bears have had over the last 5 months.
Right. I guess Canopy Growth's announcement of a loss of $1, was it $1.08 per share, certainly was enough to send a lot of people heading for the open windows over the street. And so let's say that the rest of the news is uniformly bad because there's no reason to think otherwise. When does the bottom come up in this market?
The bottom will be found where we reach a point, I view it as scales, so we have shorts and longs, and we'll reach a point where nobody is left to go short. We'll reach a point where nobody that is long is going to sell their position anymore, and we'll reach a point where institutions start saying, okay, these are fair value prices, and we see upside from here. And we've already had a few groups come out and say, we think this is the bottom. They've been wrong, but that point will come. It always comes. And that will be the shift where we see that daily and weekly uptrends start to take place.
Yep. Okay. So let me ask you this, Dan, as a technical guy, how many green candles will it take to make you a believer on, say, Canopy Growth in terms of a daily candle?
Well, I need to see, it's less about how many green in a row that we see, and it's more about the continuation move. So again, that's what a trend change is. We can see a big green 3-day move. That's great. We can go 20%. But if we do not consolidate from that move, set that higher low, and then see continuation, it doesn't mean anything. And we have examples of that in the USMJ space where a name like Ianthus will bounce 50%, not change its daily trend by forming that clear higher low and higher high, and it just slowly fades and gives it all back. So we have to see that follow through because that's what continues to put pressure on shorts, and that's what shows us that there are bulls looking to get in and buy the dips.
Okay, so at this point, that emergence of that pattern is just non-existent. I'm wondering, I'm looking at it from a fundamental basis and saying, well, okay, there's not really any reason to buy the stocks on a fundamental basis, and in fact the catalysts are all rather profoundly negative. But I do believe that the worst news possible has now happened, and anybody who could sell a share, I believe, in this market has sold a share who wants to. Anybody who's accumulating might have been wrong thinking that it was this early, but I think that the combination of the end of tax loss selling, this major revaluation, and what starts to look like capitulation to me when you see a 15% drop in a day. Mind you, we've had that so many times now that it's almost de rigueur, but those things sort of all seem to be coalescing towards an end of the year kind of. That's a good time for a reversal to happen. Tax loss selling's over. Everybody's sold all the stock they can. If the stocks are now starting to reflect fair value on a traditional fundamental basis where the multiples of the actual earnings are making sense, then why wouldn't there be a reversal and the anticipated bifurcation of quality versus those still dependent on the life support of capital markets, which I think that's where the division's going to happen. Anyways, what do you think of that? The new year is the next time I'm really looking for some kind of change.
Yeah, I mean, we just keep kicking the can down the road. It was the fall rally and 2.0 that everybody was looking towards. Now it's the end of tax loss selling. Absolutely, it could be that way. And honestly, I am shifting my game plan now where I have been playing CGC oversold bounces because as a trader, that's one of my strengths. I love oversold bounces. and I've done it fairly well with CGC the past few months, but I've always locked in my gain short term and then gone back to a fresh, clean slate. From here on out, I'm going to shift my perspective, and I'm going to be positioning myself to try and put myself in a low risk or break even point to try and build a long-term position. So an example of that would be, let's say I scale in on this dump. I don't think our bottom is in just yet, but let's say I enter at $16 and $15. So I have an average of $15.50. And then we bounce up to $16. I'll sell half of my position at a 50-cent gain. That puts my break even down at $15. And I'll set my stop at break even and then try and see a more prolonged daily trend change. And I will probably get stopped out a few times with small losses or break-even losses, and I will forego that short-term profit that I have been taking on these bounces. But that just shows my mindset somewhat agreeing with you in the sense that, you know, the darkest days are coming. I know we've said it so many times, but I do believe that we are approaching that shift that you are talking about.
Sure. All right, let's take a look at some of these charts and see what they're telling us.
So checking in on CGC, what I am talking about with a trend change, just as an example, we can look at this move that we had from 1789 to 2248. That's a big time move, big percentage gains, but no clear pivot of the daily trend change. If we had come down, established a base of support, and then broken to a higher high, that's our clear trend change. That means that anybody that went short on the way up of this move is now underwater and is forced to cover or hold their bags. And it also shows us that bulls who missed their move on the way up are getting in on this consolidation and buying the dip. So that clear trend change is something that this sector has been lacking for months and months at this point, and something that we're watching for to indicate a sector momentum shift. Right now, the bounce here on CGC after the big gap down open, it's a pretty solid bounce. We're about 5% off of the low. But again, it's all different fractals and time frames where the hourly chart needs to see exactly what I just talked about. We have our low, we have our high of the bounce wherever we top out. Right now we're battling 16 psychological. We would then have to hold the low and see continuation if we're going to see shorts get pressure put on them. Anybody that went short on this bounce would then be underwater. Anybody that went short on the way down today would then be underwater if we could change that hourly trend. And again, it shows bulls buying the dip. Bulls that missed the initial move down to the low $15 range are taking their second chance opportunity to buy in the mid $15 range, and they support the price with that higher low. So we need trend changes on the hourly first, then we'll zoom out and look at the daily chart. And we know the daily chart will likely just give us a daily lower high. We would need the daily trend change to take place. And then if we're talking very convincing sector-wide sentiment shift, we will then need a weekly trend change to take place. What stands out over the last 5 months is the fact that we've seen constant lower highs and lower lows. We have not seen a weekly trend change at any point. We haven't even really come close at any point since back in April. So the first time that we see that happen in half a year or however long it takes will be notable, and we will see bulls and bears react in kind to that shift taking place. And again, comparison to Bitcoin, I know a lot of people don't like it because of the fundamental aspect and the fact that there is actual tangible assets in the MJ space, but just looking at it from a perspective of psychology and emotional cycles, it's been 56 weeks, and CGC from the all-time high is down about 74%. Bitcoin, the same massive bull move and massive pullback, it took about 52 weeks, and we pulled back about 84%. So Bitcoin pulled back 10% more than CGC is at right now, but CGC so far is taking about a month longer to find its bottom. Again, this is definitely one of the reasons why I am looking to establish a longer term position. So I did buy the dip today on CGC. I scaled in multiple orders. I did a little bit of flipping, and essentially I ended with an average of about 1580. So depending on how we close is going to determine if I want to swing trade that position or not. But I'm going to be looking to establish a position down here in the $15 range. If we drop to lower lows, I've allocated plenty of capital where I will be comfortable adding to that position. But I will look to establish a position that eventually I can put a stop loss at break even on and let ride. If I put a stop loss at 1580 right now, we would likely pull back down when we need to set that hourly high or low, and I would likely get stopped out. So I'm holding off on that stop loss just yet. And again, I only have one of potentially 4 positions that I would be looking to enter into. So if we do drop down and break $15 to a lower low, I would definitely be just fine establishing a bit of a bigger position as we look for a short-term temporary bottom to be found.
Dan, thanks for joining us again today. Insightful as ever. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
See you soon, James.